some pretty big shifts happening in the global auto industry right now.
Yeah, it really does.
Today we're diving into the EV market specifically, and also how manufacturing itself is changing.
That's right. Fascinating look behind the curtain at companies like Audi, Tesla, Nissan, showing some unexpected challenges they're facing.
And new leaders emerging too, right? In places you might not expect.
Exactly, some surprising twists.
Okay, so...
Because, when Audi first went big into China, their whole approach was Vorsprung durch Technik,
Yeah.
bringing German engineering their established expertise.
Progress through technology? Yeah, they were the masters, gonna teach the apprentices, basically. Exporting the know-how.
But here's the twist. Audi actually became the student. They learned a ton from China, especially around efficiency, navigating local policy, and maybe most surprisingly, automation.
How did that happen?
Well, it ties into China's big strategic push, the Made in China plan over the last decade or so. They've been heavily promoting domestic manufacturing tech, especially things like advanced robots. Think KUKA, companies like that.
Right, building up their own industrial base, and Audi tapped into that.
It really did. Their plant in Changchun, according to the sources, became this benchmark for automation within Audi. The scale is pretty staggering. They mentioned over 800 KUKA robots just welding car frames.
800 just for welding. Wow, so robots are really dominating the factory floor there.
On a per-shift basis, yeah. But the reason for this massive automation, this is what's really interesting. Tobias Leibeck, he's Audi's head of manufacturing engineering there, is quoted saying they didn't actually expect to automate quite so much.
Why not? What changed?
The price. He said the pricing they got from Chinese suppliers for all this high-end automation tech was just incredibly low, lower than they anticipated. It made throwing robots at the process far more cost-effective than maybe they'd planned for.
Okay, that is fascinating. So it wasn't just cheap labor, it was cheap robots too, driven by China's industrial policy.
Precisely. China created this environment where the tools of advanced manufacturing became super accessible and affordable. It basically let Audi jump ahead on their own automation goals, using Chinese tech and suppliers to do it.
And the advantages are obvious, I guess. Robots don't call in sick, they don't need brakes.
Exactly. The sources mentioned that. They even tested some more humanoid-type robots like Optimus, but found these specialized multi-armed ones, like with 4 or 5 arms, were actually more efficient for the specific tasks on the line.
So this Audi experience, it's kind of a microcosm of a bigger trend.
Absolutely. China's industrial push hasn't just changed where things are made, it's changed the cost of making things, including the machinery itself. This feeds directly into why we're seeing such competitive pricing on EVs from China and how local players rose so fast.
And it's causing ripples globally now, trade tensions.
Yeah. Other countries are starting to talk about trade barriers, citing these market distortions, because China's state support has made their industry so competitive. It really is shifting the global balance.
Wow. So Audi went in thinking Vorsprung durch Technik and came out with a masterclass in modern manufacturing efficiency, courtesy of the Chinese ecosystem. Teacher becomes the student.
A classic case. And speaking of shifts, let's pivot to who's actually leading in the market, particularly China's EV space. Because Tesla, for the longest time, was seen as untouchable there, right? Like a battery-powered space deity, as one source put it.
Oh, absolutely. They set the benchmark. Everyone else seemed to be playing catch-up, especially in that premium segment.
Well, brace yourself. A recent UBS survey, highlighted in these sources, says Tesla has actually lost its status as the technology leader in China.
Lost it? Seriously, to who?
The numbers are pretty stark. Tesla's brand preference for choice, it's down 4% year over year, sitting at just 14%. And that puts them behind BYD.
Okay, BYD, that makes sense. They're huge.
And also behind Xiaomi.
Wait, Xiaomi? The phone company? The guys who make, like, smart light bulbs and robot vacuums? They're seen as more of a tech leader in cars than Tesla now in China.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the speed and ferocity of competition over there.
How did that happen? How's a phone company suddenly leapfrogging Tesla?
Intense competition. A UBS analyst, Joseph Spock, is quoted saying pretty bluntly, Tesla is no longer seen as the technology leader in China. And the South China Morning Post adds some color, saying Chinese car makers are just churning out smarter models than the Model 3 and Y, often at lower costs.
Smarter and cheaper, that's a tough combo to beat.
It really is. And they argue it's largely siphoned off buying interest from Tesla. Now, we should be clear, Tesla is still massive there.
Right. China's a huge market for them. Second largest globally, wasn't it?
Yep, second largest.
Yeah.
And they still lead among foreign brands. But that perception, that aura of being the undisputed tech leader, it seems to have faded fast against these local competitors, BYD and, yeah, even Xiaomi now.
So this isn't just a Tesla problem, it's something a lot of Western automakers are grappling with. The local Chinese brands are just getting really good really fast and appealing more to Chinese buyers.
Exactly. It shows how quickly that crown can slip if you're not constantly innovating and staying fresh. Potentially hurting the brand in Europe, maybe. But in China, the key reason cited is just this relentless wave of competitive, feature-packed, lower-cost local EVs.
Okay, so we've seen a German giant learning lessons in China, an American tech icon facing new rivals. Let's switch gears again. What about Japan? Nissan comes up in the sources, and the picture doesn't sound great. Still hurting, is how one source put it.
Yeah, hurting might be an understatement. They're in a really tough spot. Sales are down, and North America seems particularly bad, described as a brutal beating.
How bad?
Get this. They apparently spent 99% of their Q2 profits last year just on incentives, trying to push cars off the lots.
99%. Wow, that sounds desperate, like they just can't move the metal otherwise.
It definitely signals deep trouble. And it seems they're taking drastic action. Based on internal emails Reuters saw, they're pushing buyouts for U.S. workers, especially in the Canton plant in Mississippi, but also salaried staff elsewhere, HR, IT, finance folks.
Ouch. And wage freezes too?
Yep, suspended merit-based pay rises globally. It really points to a major cash crunch and a need to slash costs fast.
So what's the overall scale of these cuts?
The CEO, Ivan Espinosa, has this plan. It includes closing 7 production sites globally, cutting another 11,000 jobs on top of previous cuts. We're talking a total workforce reduction of around 20,000 people.
20,000? That's massive. What are the underlying reasons driving this, according to the sources? Why are things so bad for Nissan?
It sounds like a perfect storm, really. Having too many workers for their current sales levels, an aging product lineup that just isn't exciting buyers, very little technical innovation recently, and crucially, not enough compelling EV and hybrid options.
So, falling behind on multiple fronts.
Pretty much. The America's chairman, Christian Monier, is quoted saying these layoffs are tough but necessary to right-size Nissan and crucial for Nissan's comeback.
Still, the language used to describe it. Controlled demolition, canceled EV projects, an unknown future. It sounds pretty grim.
It really does paint a stark picture.
Yeah.
And when you take these 3 stories together, Audi learning about robots, Tesla losing its tech halo in China, Nissan fighting for survival, you start to see, well, the connections, right?
Exactly. These aren't just isolated company dramas. They reflect these huge underlying shifts.
Right. You see the massive impact of China's industrial strategy, not just making things, but making the tools to make things cheaply and well. You see how incredibly fast new players, even, a phone company, can disrupt the old guard.
And the absolute pressure on legacy automakers. Innovate in the EV space, and fast, or face really serious consequences.
It's a global shakeup. Who makes cars, how they're made, who's leading on tech, that's all changing.
Because it directly impacts the cars you might buy, the technology inside them, where they come from, and even bigger things like jobs and the global economy.
We saw Audi, expecting to teach in China, actually learning vital lessons about automation from the Chinese ecosystem.
Then Tesla, the undisputed EV king in China for years, suddenly finding itself behind local players like BYD and even Xiaomi in perceived tech leadership, thanks to smarter, cheaper competition.
And finally, Nissan, grappling with weak sales, an aging lineup, and a lack of innovation, leading to huge job cuts and this sort of controlled demolition restructuring.
The whole EV landscape is changing at lightning speed. Innovation isn't coming from just the usual suspects anymore. A lot of the really cutting-edge stuff is recent and from unexpected places.
And really leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it?
It does. Considering all these rapid shifts, the struggles of some established names, the rise of these surprising innovators, who do you think is actually driving the most significant innovation in the EV world today? And what does that tell us about where the future of getting around is really headed?